Chapter 1. Evacuation. Sirens blared, then cut to absolute silence, then screamed again. My eyes snapped open, wide as saucers. Before my brain could process the noise, the room's automated lights flared to life, blinding me. I was disoriented, suffocated by sleep, and entirely new to this world. A muster drill, I told myself, trying to calm my racing pulse. Veteran crew members had warned me about these random nighttime drills, but I'd never experienced one. Fantastic, I thought. Just my bloody luck. I glanced at the clock. 12:30 a.m. I threw back the covers, preparing to go through the motions, when a cold, serious voice cut through the tannoy. "This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. Proceed to your muster station immediately." The announcement repeated, its clinical tone more terrifying than the sirens that followed. The reality sank in within seconds. My heart stopped, then adrenaline kicked my arse into gear. I jumped out of bed. That was my first mistake. When it is your first night in a strange place, sleeping on a top bunk, you do not possess clear thinking. I didn't step out of bed. I dropped straight out of it. Pain erupted through my legs as I slammed heavily onto the floor from the upper bunk. Well, I was awake now. There I lay in the flashing glare of emergency strobe lights, wearing nothing but boxer shorts, trying to comprehend that my life was in danger. Panic set in. I was completely alone. Months ago, mandatory survival training had tried to prepare me for this exact nightmare. Training is vital, everything, because you are trapped in one of the most volatile, isolated environments on Earth. In the old days, before strict health and safety laws, these offshore rigs were grim, lethal places. To be honest, they still are. Up until this moment, my sense of safety was born purely out of naivety. Training teaches you the brutal reality of our location. There is no standard escape route. If you end up in the sea during the winter months, the water sits at a lethal 4 degrees Celsius. Without a specialized survival suit, your muscles freeze within minutes, rendering you helpless. Even worse is the threat of dry drowning, where the shock of the cold water causes your larynx to spasm shut, suffocating you from the inside out, while your lungs desperately fight for air until hypoxia kills you. I scrambled up from the floor. I needed to get dressed. I needed to move, because outside my cabin door, the black ocean was waiting. With the horrors of the North Sea flashing through my mind, I needed warm layers, and I needed them now. Hands shaking, I hastily threw on jeans, socks, a t-shirt, and a jumper. "Be calm," I ordered myself. "Slow your breathing." I was screaming at my own brain to cooperate, but my body wasn't listening. Panic was already clouding my judgment. Then the room began to shake violently. A major earthquake in the North Sea? No, that was impossible. When I first arrived, I'd been thrilled to score a stateroom all to myself. Now, as the walls vibrated, I desperately wished an experienced hand was in the room to tell me what the hell was happening. I yanked the cabin door open. Far down the corridor, the heavy doors of the stairwell were just clicking shut behind the last few crew members. I sprinted after them, but halfway down the hall, I froze. My second mistake struck me like a physical blow. Shit, my survival suit. Upon arrival, the very first rule after your welcome briefing is to unpack your gear and hang your survival suit in its designated locker. Instructors beat it into your head. Look after this suit. It is the only thing between you and death. If alarms go off, you do not leave without it. I stood frozen in the corridor, forced to make a split-second decision. Turn back to the cabin or run to the muster point empty-handed. Training dictates that if your suit is missing, spare suits are kept at the muster stations. But a terrifying thought screamed in my mind. What if the spares are already gone? Right or wrong, the decision was made. I was going back. If the worst happened, I wanted a fighting chance against the black ocean. I tore back down the corridor, the clock ticking loudly in my head. Inside the cabin, I ripped the heavy suit off its hook. Fuck me, which way does this go? I absolutely hated these things. Panic took hold again, blindingly sharp. "Calm down, you prick," I hissed at myself. Finally, I figured out the front from the back and clambered inside. I yanked the zipper up and squatted down hard to expel the trapped air through the neck seal. If you don't burp the suit, You turn into a human Michelin man, completely unable to bend your limbs. Packed tightly into the rubberized suit, I bolted out of the cabin, breathing like a freight train. I sprinted to the end of the corridor, burst through the doors, and took the stairs. 1 flight, 2, 3, 4. 4 double stairwells, my lungs burning. I threw open the final door and burst out onto the lower deck, just beneath the helideck. Massive lifeboats hung from their winches against the dark sky, primed for launch. The entire crew was already there, standing in eerie, disciplined silence within their designated groups. Fuck, am I the last one? It certainly looked like it. A sea of eyes turned toward me. On the wall, the T-card rack, the rig's literal life-or-death roll call system, had only a few tags left unturned. You find your name, flip the card over, and slot it back in to prove you're alive and accounted for. Right there, glaring at me like a neon sign, was the name Hall. It practically screamed, "Come on, you dick, get on with it." Under the silent, watchful gaze of 100 seasoned offshore workers, I reached out and flipped my card. I was officially registered. Thank fuck for that. Now mustered, I was instructed to move to my designated lifeboat station, boat number 3. I joined the solemn group of men who all stood there silently, looking at the surroundings. Now at this juncture, maybe I should point out exactly where I was. It was Sunday, 28th May, year 1998. I was stood outside in the cool night air, with only a slight breeze along with a clear sky, which was full of millions of stars, all of which looked fantastic. I was standing on a jack-up oil rig, currently located in the North Sea. This drilling platform was known as Galaxy 3. So, I was stood among 82 other men and women, mostly men, all of which could have talked the back legs off a donkey, but now standing there with not a word being spoken, apart from the roar of the ocean some 150 feet below the metal grating, we were stood upon. This in itself would be spooky, however topped with the situation, and the fact that the sea seemed a gigantic curdling mass of noise and motion, this made the situation more surreal, and the tension could have been cut with a knife. The strange thing was, and it took a few minutes for this to dawn on me, but the sea looked as though it was in the middle of a Force 9 storm. However, around the platform, when you looked out into the distance, which was illuminated by the high-powered floodlights, the sea was calm. In fact, it was more than calm, it was like a mill pond. Now, you don't have to be a genius to know this is not normal, or understand the complex workings of an oil rig and its drilling operations. So you can understand why, at this point, a sudden realization kicked in. I felt suddenly cold, with an icy feeling running down my spine, the sort of feeling you would get if you know something is seriously wrong and you're in imminent danger. In addition to this, and for some time now, the rig had been shaking and shuddering with large, deep growls, as if the platform was in immense pain. Now don't get me wrong, an oil rig, especially when drilling 24/7, is not a quiet place, and does vibrate and shake. But this was not what was currently being experienced. It was way more intense, to the point of making it difficult to even stand. The water below continued with its noisy and violent outburst without so much as a pause. The rig occasionally took a yet another long, violent shudder, as if to say, "Don't get comfy, lad! Get ready to swim!" I decided silence was not the way forward, so looked at the much older chap standing next to me and decided to strike up a conversation. I asked him if he had been working on rigs long. In his broad Scottish accent, he replied,
"I have been on rigs for over 25 years now."
Gaining confidence in this guy knowing his stuff, I inquired in my calmest voice and with a fake grin. "So this sort of thing is normal then?" The reply came back from him calmly, but he had a serious expression.
"No, I have never experienced anything like this."
Again, trying to remain calm, I asked what he thought was happening, to which he took a pause, then replied,
"I think they've hit shallow gas, and now the well is collapsing. This is a shit situation, I tell you."
There was absolutely nowhere to run. We all just stood there in confusion. At the time, I could not understand why we were not getting into the lifeboats and heading for freedom. But later, after gaining an understanding of the situation, learnt that, due to a massive amount of escaping gas rising from the deep seabed, through the broken well walls, we had a major problem. The huge bubbles which rose to the surface and broke would effectively act as air, Therefore, the buoyancy normally created by water was gone. This would have the same effect as launching your boat from a plane mid-flight. This definitely would not have been good. The boats would have sank to the ocean floor after they had been thrown about for several minutes like a child's toy in the bath. I thank the person or persons that fully understood why launching boats in such conditions would not have been the best option. We all stood on the outside platform for around an hour. Slowly, the chaotic effect from the gas leak started to subside. At this point, we were all moved into the heli reception. This is the meeting room for all persons debarking the helicopter, or alternatively, the lucky ones, preparing to board the helicopter and head for home. This room has positive air pressure to prevent any toxic gas from entering. The pressure outside this room is less than inside, so air would always want to vent out. Normally, this is a fairly big room, has several chairs, and plenty of space to take off your survival suits, which had to be worn whilst in transit on the helicopter. However, when suddenly you fill this with 60 or more bodies, it becomes cramped and uncomfortable. People made themselves as comfy as possible on the chairs or the floor before the OIM requested silence so he could speak. The OIM is the Offshore Installation Manager. He is effectively top dog and in charge of the installation. So what he says goes. These guys have many years of experience and have gained this position by working their way up the ladder whilst gaining a wealth of knowledge on the way. Therefore, you assume they know what they're talking about, most of the time anyway. So with the new silence, just demanded, an update was given.
Let me start by giving you all reassurance. The situation is under control, and the relevant personnel are dealing with the problem. The situation is that around midnight tonight, whilst continuing to drill the well, the drill head broke through into an area of unexpected shallow gas, the result of which has caused the surrounding well to collapse, allowing gas to escape. The well is currently being injected with cement in an attempt to plug the leak and regain control. I inform you all that this could take several hours, and due to the validity of the situation, even though we are happy, the rig is safe. I have taken the decision to evacuate all non-essential personnel as a precautionary measure. The Coast Guard and Bristow's helicopter teams have been informed and support the situation. All necessary aircraft are being readied and will be en route shortly. I ask you all to remain calm and in this room at this time. Gas detectors have detected toxic gases on the lower decks, and these are strictly out of bounds for all personnel. Thank you for your understanding. I will keep you all updated. Does anyone have any questions or concerns at this time?
Choppers were on the way, thank God. I had now decided there was more to life, and could not wait to leave this rig. Once back on shore, there would be no coming back for me. So time ticked, whilst we waited for the first chopper to land. Flight time for the chopper was approximately 45 minutes from its base in Aberdeen. During this time, the rig slowly stopped shaking and the roar from outside subsided. Things at this point seemed to be on the mend. This was soon confirmed by another announcement from the OIM.
I can confirm the situation is now under control and the wellhead has successfully been plugged. Due to this rapid success, the decision has been taken to abort the evacuation. We will start to allow persons to return to relevant areas once confirmation has been given that all gas has dispersed.
Now, should I be grateful at this point or disappointed? I did not know how to feel. The situation was under control and things were returning to normality. That had to be good. However, I was now not getting off the rig and had to remain in this godforsaken place. A definite disappointment on the whole. The mood in the room quickly gained positivity and smiles returned to people's faces. Banter was being bounced around the room like people had just won the lottery. Suddenly, everyone fell instantly silent. The rig had just took a massive shudder. Some people standing had to grab nearby furniture to prevent falling. The almighty Ra was back with vengeance. Curses were being uttered from all directions. This now seemed worse than before. Adjacent to the room we were in was the radio room. The OIM and other relevant persons were in this, looking after the situation. Commotion could be heard from this room. Things had definitely gone south. I sat, silently watching persons around me who were trying to laugh this off, whilst others held extremely serious expressions, mine being one of them. I continued to look toward the radio room, wondering what was being said. It did not sound good. By this time, people had become restless, and smokers among the group were craving nicotine. Maybe because of simple addiction, or just due to the desperate situation we were in. Either way, this fueled their need for the nicotine hit. Not being a smoker, the only craving I had was for a chopper. The OIM was questioned regarding smoking. People were desperate to smoke. He stated to all categorically this would not be permitted. People would just have to wait. For persons who have never been offshore, you're lucky. There are far better places to be. Smoking offshore, even in the days where it was not restricted, was prohibited through the rig unless in a designated smoking area. These areas were normally a smoking lounge with a TV and also a few tea shacks located adjacent to the main work areas throughout the rig floor. As you can imagine, to allow uncontrolled smoking on a platform which contained thousands of barrels of highly flammable petrochemical substance would be a very bad idea indeed. At this time, sensors were reporting the lower decks where the smoking lounge resided had high levels of toxic explosive gas. Also, the tea shacks which were on the rig floor, which were not accessible at this time unless you were one of the unfortunate individuals actively working there, mixing cement and pumping this down the well. The stress on the offshore installation manager's face was now becoming evident. This must have seemed strange to those that know him. I imagine the OIM is a person who was normally extremely calm and used to intense stress as demanded by the job. As tensions rose, the OIM declared, "If you need to clear your head or have a smoke, you are permitted to step outside on the graded flooring. This will be the only designated area to smoke at this time, and do not discard your nubs into the ocean." Had I heard this correctly? I was convinced I had misheard. "A smoke? Is he out of his fucking mind?" I heard someone next to me mutter. "We've got a high-pressure gas plume venting right under our boots, and they're letting blokes strike open flames on the deck?" It felt like madness. Every safety briefing given had hammered home a single, unshakable rule. Gas and fire meant an instant ticket to the bottom of the North Sea. Yet, the logic from the OIM seemed to be shrouded in the high-stakes calculus of disaster management, was driven by a different kind of desperation. The OIM knew that panic was just as lethal as pressure. Dozens of men trapped in a suffocating steel box, waiting for evacuation in the midnight sea, were a powder keg of nerves. A controlled open-air space to breathe and steady their hands was deemed a calculated risk to keep the peace. I decided to go for air and followed a small line of men pushing through the heavy weather doors out onto the starboard walkway. Stepping out onto the open steel grating was surreal. The North Sea wind slammed into me, freezing and wild, but beneath our feet, the deck flooring vibrated with the terrifying deep tissue hum of the subterranean leak. Looking down through the open metal mesh, the black ocean churned 150 feet below. A few feet away, a drill floor's hand shook violently as he struck a plastic lighter. The tiny yellow flame flared to life, casting a fragile glow on his pale face before he pressed it to a cigarette. To me, that tiny spark looked like a stick of dynamite. Every man on that deck held their breath, half expecting the air around them to ignite into a sheet of fire. Nobody spoke. They just stood on the grating, staring out into the pitch-black horizon, drawing heavy, hurried drags of tobacco, while the invisible cloud of natural gas hissed somewhere in the darkness nearby. It was a moment of sheer absurdity. A handful of men smoking on the edge of a volcano, praying the wind kept blowing the right way. Chapter 2. Choppers. Time passed before we were informed the evacuation was to recommence. Choppers had again been scrambled and were already en route. Names of those for evacuation were announced, whilst at the same time, persons were informed what chopper they were to disembark on, first, second, third, and so on. I was to be on the second flight. The first would have obviously been better, but at last we seemed destined to be leaving. Persons donned their survival suits in readiness. On final approach, the pilot would see the superstructure, supported by the massive steel legs of the oil rig, rising from the churning, dark Atlantic Ocean like a modern fortress. In the expanding radius around the platform would be the surreal sight of a calm ocean. During the final approach, the pilot flares the nose upward to scrub off forward speed as the aircraft hovers momentarily, battling violent offshore gusts. Its turboshaft engines scream with thousands of horsepower, churning the ocean spray into a fine mist. Titan-sized rotor blades flex up and down, micro-adjusting to maintain a steady descent. The heavy-duty landing gear meets the steel deck, absorbing the multi-ton impact smoothly. Deck crew rush forward in high-visibility gear to chock the wheels and attach tie-down straps. The piercing whine decays into a low rumble, completing a seamless link between sky and sea. The Super Puma AS332 can seat up to 15 passengers along with 2 pilots. This is not like being on a plane where you can get up and walk around. 15 people are crammed into a space which feels like it was built for 10, tightly strapped into their seats with a 5-point buckle harness, engineered for absolute security. This harness has the ability to hold the occupant firmly in place to protect against high G-forces and heavy vibrations. You can also forget about a toilet break. You hold it unless you want to feel a sudden, intense rush of heat spreading rapidly around your lower body. Because survival suits are completely waterproof and airtight, the liquid has nowhere to go. The initial feeling is one of immense mental relief as you finally let go of extreme bladder pressure, although after a few minutes, the liquid cools down to match the surrounding ambient temperature, leaving you feeling cold, clammy, and shivering. You become hyper-aware of the small, enclosed cabin and worry intensely whether the smell will escape the suit's neck or wrist seals to alert your crewmates. The deafening roar resumed as the engines increased and the main rotors accelerated to produce a hurricane-force wall of air across the deck. Sound bouncing off the steel structures around the platform as the helicopter prepares for departure. The air is suddenly filled with a hot scent of kerosene. With a heavy thudding sound, the multi-ton aircraft lifts, defying gravity, before tilting forward and heading away from the platform. The mechanical scream decays and the roaring ocean can again be heard. Some 25 minutes later, a smaller chopper landed from Her Majesty's Coast Guard. Finally, my taxi had arrived. 5 of us walked out, 2 men, 2 women, and myself. We exited the reception through the airlock onto the open deck grid plating, exposing the churning sea 150 feet below, a noisy, writhing mass of white, chaotic waves. Walking across the decking, we stood beneath the helideck. Life jackets were issued, and we climbed the open stairwell. If you have issues with heights, this place was not for you. The large circular platform sat cantilevered out over the ocean. It had no side railings, just a sheer drop to the dark water below. A perimeter safety net was there to catch the unlucky, though I had no desire to test it. The night sky was clear, and the Coast Guard chopper looked incredibly small compared to the Super Puma giants that usually ferry rig crews. The 2 women climbed up first. I was next, adrenaline racing alongside a cocktail of raw emotions. As the second woman entered the chopper's small rear door, she accidentally caught her pull cord. With a sudden compressive bang, her life jacket instantly inflated. She was wedged solid between the door walls. Only to me, I thought. Why couldn't she just board easily? She was helped back down and given a replacement jacket. You had to feel sorry for her. Like the rest of us, she just wanted off. Finally, we were all crammed inside the tight cabin, and the heavy doors slammed shut with a metallic thud that sealed us in. The engine pitch immediately shifted to a deafening, high-pitched whine that reverberated straight through the floorboards and into my teeth. The air inside was suffocatingly thick, heavy with the sharp, acrid stench of aviation fuel mixed with the stale sweat of terrified people. As the rotor blades sliced the night air, the cabin erupted into a violent, rattling vibration. My stomach plummeted into my shoes as the chopper pitched sharply forward, breaking gravity. We lifted off into the black void. Looking out the small window, the glowing structure of Galaxy 3 rapidly shrank into the dark expanse, and a sudden calm breeze washed over me. I had escaped. This would be a hell of a story to tell. The pilot welcomed us, calling it a strange night. He had already deployed during the first evacuation before being turned back halfway out. After a short flight, we landed on a neighboring platform. Disembarking, the new rig crew led us down to the heli reception. Following a brief safety briefing, we were taken to the TV lounge. I poured a hot coffee, desperately wishing it was something stronger, and slumped into a leather chair. MTV was playing Robbie Williams' Rock DJ. In the video, Williams strips naked, then tears away his skin and muscle until he is a dancing skeleton. It felt terrifyingly fitting. You can look up rig blowouts online. They end in catastrophic disaster. Fire is the ultimate killer out there. When a petrochemical leak ignites, it takes hold in seconds. Industry safety has increased tenfold since the 1988 Piper Alpha disaster, but you are still sitting on a steel cage in the middle of a hostile ocean. Whether it is fixed, a jackup, or a semi-submersible, there is nowhere to run when things go wrong. Safety precautions are rigorously tested, but survival is never guaranteed. The industry claims safety is the priority, but that is a lie. Money is king, without doubt. New rigs are built in cheap locations by terrified, low-skilled workers who hide critical mistakes to protect their jobs. Corners are cut to slice budgets. These massive, shiny structures leave dry dock looking pristine, but underneath the fresh paint, they are ticking time bombs patiently waiting to explode. The evacuation of the Galaxy 3 made national news, but by morning, the corporate machine was already spinning its web of lies. Executives and PR teams worked through the night, aggressively whitewashing the narrative before the press could ask real questions. By sunrise, the media was fed a heavily sanitized, utterly unrecognizable version of the truth. Those of us on board that night know what really happened on the 28th of May, 1998. We lived through the terror, but we were quickly met with a cold reality. Ruthless, unspoken job threats designed to bury the truth forever. To the oil giants, our lives were expendable, but their reputations and stock prices were sacred. A headline exposing how close the oil giant came to a mass casualty disaster would have cost them billions, so they buried the terror under a mountain of non-disclosure agreements and corporate intimidation. A North Sea platform was temporarily shut down by the health and safety executive. Prohibition notices were served on the rig installation after inspectors went on board the platform, 300 miles northeast of Aberdeen, to investigate a gas leak. While they were on board, a second escape occurred. The HSE said emergency response procedures left a lot to be desired. No one was injured in either of the incidents. As I sit here writing this, the phantom smell of gas still hits the back of my throat, and my heart rate spikes into pure panic. I remember the exact second my chest tightened, the suffocating realization that I was trapped on a steel platform surrounded by highly volatile chemicals, with absolutely nowhere to run. My mind flashes back to the sheer terror of staring down at that black, freezing ocean, knowing that if the spark caught, the water would be my only escape, and that the fall alone would kill me. We survived by pure, unadulterated luck. The system held together by the skin of its teeth, but the psychological scars don't just wash away. If the wind had shifted by a single degree, or if one exhausted worker had struck a spark near that venting gas, the nightmare would have consumed us all. I wouldn't be here to tell this story, and you wouldn't be reading a survivor's memory. Instead, the Galaxy 3 would have been reduced to a blackened, twisted graveyard at the bottom of the North Sea. Just another pile of bodies and incinerated steel, quietly scrubbed from the corporate balance sheet. Years have passed since that night, but the industry hasn't changed. The shiny new platforms still roll out of the shipyards, and the executives still read from the same safety-first script. But every time I see a news report about a minor incident offshore, I don't see corporate spin. I see the terrified faces in the dark. I see the 150-foot drop. I see a system that will gladly gamble your life for a fraction of a percent on a stock chart, secure in the knowledge that if you burn, they can always buy enough silence to bury the ashes. Chapter 3. Return to Galaxy 3. I stepped off the chopper believing my offshore career was dead and buried. The first trip had been unforgettable for all the wrong reasons, and I swore I'd never look at another rig again. Galaxy 3 was supposed to be a ghost in my rearview mirror, but peace is an illusion. I had no idea that a dark turn of events was already unfolding, and that Galaxy 3 would soon force me back into its steel corridors.
pushed away. Galaxy 3, get out. Galaxy 3, get out. Gas in the water, we gotta get out. Galaxy 3, get out. Galaxy 3, get out. Whoop, 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 overhead. Take us out now. Kept shouting names through the static and the smoke. Every soul on that manifest, his voice almost broke. One by one they climbed aboard, with the blades in a blur. That machine beat the night apart, and the whole rig had said, Galaxy 3, get out. Galaxy 3, get out. Gas in the water, we gotta get out. Galaxy 3, get out. Galaxy 3, get out. Whoop, 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 overhead. Take us out now.
There's More to Life, a novel by BHDX.